I tried to apply to an art school, New Zealand's most prestigious art school, and they wouldn't have me. And then so I went to another one, but then I found that it just didn't fit me. There is not one size fits all, right? There are incredible artists like James Gurney, who did Dinotopia, which is one of the most inspirational books to me, but that is fundamentally different than that. I want to look at a blank page and fall into it and make marks on it until the vision I have in my head comes up there.
In this episode, I'm joined by Greg Broadmore again. He's a concept artist and illustrator at Weta Workshop, mostly known for his work on movies like Avatar, King Kong, and District 9. In this episode, we're talking about his personal project, One Path. It's a graphic novel that he's been working on for probably about 5 or 10 years. In this episode, we're talking a little bit about how he follows through on doing personal projects like this and choosing something that's maybe a little bit less commercially practical and viable in favor of something that's more in line with what he wants to be doing artistically. We also talk a little bit about what it means to be an artist professionally and trying to balance and manage the practical side of paying your bills while also doing the things that you really love. If you'd want to consider checking out his book, the link is going to be in the description. Also, if you'd like to support me, please check out the links to the courses in the description. Your guys' support really does help me make more content like this. Also, please like and subscribe. That really does help me out. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Right. Well, I guess I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that project in general, because I think that the hardest thing about being an artist is like deciding which project to do and how to spend your time, And in terms of choosing the thing that you've chosen, it's something that's really near and dear to your heart. It's really special to you. But it's also like unexpected or not what you would normally do if you want to make like a commercial product, And I guess I kind of wanted to talk to you about like, how do you choose to do something like that? And how do you like learn the skills to actually make a graphic novel or to actually execute on this thing that you've done?
Yeah. There's a few parts of that question to talk about. The big one, the meaty one, is the sort of almost the first part you talked about. It's like, how do you choose? And in my case, it's not necessarily commercial, right? But and I often go through that train of thought in my head, going like, well, this is what I'm doing is definitely a bit weird. That's not my way of thinking about it. I don't think of it as weird. I think of it as completely normal because I'm me and my work I'm doing makes sense to me. But I know from experience with people in the rest of the world that sometimes they find that weird. I'm okay with that. But I don't think of it as being non-commercial. I do think of it as being against a lot of the thought processes that go into making commercial artwork, because a lot of whenever people are making movies, video games, comics, whatever, there's this process of like thinking, what does the audience want, right? And the producer mindset is to think what was successful before, and so make more of that. Star Wars was successful, therefore let's make a science fiction film. People seem to want those, right? But they forget the important thing that when George Lucas made Star Wars, no one was really making science fiction movies like that. In fact, it was the opposite of what most people were doing, and it was not where most of the money in filmmaking was rolling. It was a long shot. It was a bet. He was outside the norm. And so he wasn't sitting there thinking necessarily about what does the audience want exactly. He was thinking about deep human things, that would connect with people, of course. But he wasn't doing the commercial thing. He was probably, really, like I'm saying, he's doing the opposite of it. But he's definitely following his gut, following his heart, and had a story he wanted to tell and a vision of a world. And so that to me is like, that's a great example of something that is arguably anti-commercial, and yet has gone on to be one of the most commercially successful things ever. Now to the point where the soul is sucked out of it, but that's another story, right? And that's true to me of anything interesting, like Steve Jobs and the iPhone. People weren't like desiring to have, if you'd asked what should be done next with phones, people would have said cheaper, more robust, like the Nokia is the most impressive piece of phone technology ever. So what do they want? They would like it to be cheaper. They would like it to be more bulletproof. No one's sitting there going like, oh, I should have a high quality screen and be able to browse the internet and take high quality photos and remove all the buttons, make it more fragile. There's none. Had you gone and asked all the other manufacturers or done any market research, they would have all said, well, that's a stupid idea. Don't do that. right? But he realized, no, this makes sense to me. You could argue that it's anti-commercial. Of course, it wasn't anti-commercial. He's just completely going against the grain of what was considered normal. And I think the same way when I'm making one path. I know it's got lots of choices in it that seem anti-commercial, and maybe they are. We're fucked if I know. I'll find out the hard way. But to me, they feel true, or they feel pure, or maybe those are a bit too emotional words, but they feel right, And so I chase after those things, knowing that if it feels right to me, that's the best choice that it can be. And any choice that waters that down, which would be often are the commercial choices, then I know it will make it weaker, right? And people will say, but if you would have changed this or that, it would have a broader audience, right? And it could be more commercially successful. But I'm like, then it would be less true, have less heart, less integrity. And as an audience member, I would feel that, right? And so I go completely the other way. It's like it doesn't. What was commercially successful in the past is not relevant, or not very relevant. And what feels right is all that really matters. And not only right in some, hedonistic kind of way. I'm not chasing after pleasure for it. Sometimes the things that you create in these stories are very painful, and I don't even want to experience them. They were just right in the moment as I'm creating the story. And they come out, and you're like, that is just what it is. I don't even like in my book, there's pages I turn to and I don't even like looking at them because it's painful, right? And so the rational part of my mind that would have gone like, what's more commercial, would have said, don't do that, right? That hurts. You don't even like looking at it. But some part of you, the full complexity of you goes like that feels right. It has to be there.
Right. Well, and I think a part of this thing is like you are drawing representationally. It's not like you're drawing completely abstractly. You're drawing figures, you're drawing anatomy, and you're drawing dinosaurs and trees and rocks, things that have an objective right or wrong, like that either looks like a person or a dinosaur or it doesn't, And sure, like the emotional aspect of it, of being able to draw something emotionally, that is definitely there. But then there's that realistic thing where you have to draw something that does fit the representation of what you're trying to communicate. And for a lot of people, they want the skills to go and create a graphic novel, to be creative, to go and tell the stories that are in their head, but they don't quite have the skills necessary, quote unquote, to go and do that, And the advice that I hear is generally, it's one of two things, and they're completely opposite. It's to go and study and go to art school and, study Scott Robertson and study perspective and Andrew Loomis. And the other one is just to go and do it. Like as someone who's walking down this path right now, do you have any thoughts or advice on that?
Yeah, I think this does depend on the individual. It does depend on what you're aiming to do. If you want to do something, I'm just talk generally, not just about art, but if you want to do something extraordinarily complex, right, with multiple domains of expertise, then kind of it does, for some people, going away and researching those things deeply, however, through a formal school or through taking your own time to research it, that does make the most sense. For me and people like me, I think it's more about jumping in and doing it and finding out the hard way, because nothing will teach you faster than trying to do it and failing. That's how and then you will literally learn the things that you are not so good at, which are things you need to focus on. And maybe those are things you need to go away and learn more about, or maybe they're just things you need to apply yourself more to, think about from a different perspective, challenge with a different approach. So that's the way I come at it. And I had done that from the start when I was a little kid, and I loved comic books. The first thing I would do is, I've got a blank page. I'm just going to draw a comic book. Right. And the learning was from looking at the other comic books and going, well, there's this format, like there's panels on a page and there's these little bubbles, right? And so you're learning it literally by absorbing it and then applying yourself to it. And I just continue to do that. Books like that are the most complex thing. And I kind of think there are lots of books where they feel really quite formal, where it's like someone is like, this is the way something is done, and they just follow that format. And to me, those are always the least interesting ones. The ones where someone has come at it perhaps naively because they maybe don't know how something works and just put themselves into it. Those things become much more interesting because they have more idiosyncrasies and more individuality in them. So, yeah, but from a learning point of view, I think you really learn the most by applying yourself. And again, of course, you're going to fail at some level. In fact, you're going to keep on failing. But the successes will get greater as if you're in some level of stasis, some level where you don't feel like you're failing, you're in a place of stasis or in a place of plateau. It's quite often just failure after failure until you reach success. And sometimes it's looking back at all these failures and going, actually, I can see the improvement there. And look, like that point there is really good. It felt like a failure at the time, but it's not. You can see the movement. But when you're there, in the middle of it, it's very hard to appreciate that. It really takes time. And so that's why moving forward, just applying yourself and doing it and moving forward is usually the best. You will look back. I even look back with my book, One Path, which I started writing during COVID and then started illustrating probably 6 months or a year later. So some of the pages, even though this book doesn't come out till April, some of the pages were illustrated in 2020. So it's like 4 years old almost, coming out 5 years old. So I look at it now and feel like it's a different person that drew it. I look at some panels and I go, I don't know who, that's weird. Like I look at it and think, I don't know who that person is, and I don't know if I could draw like that person. It's a good feeling and a bad feeling. I was saying this to Kate last night, that it's lovely because you realize, that's a great piece of illustration. Good work, Greg. But then I can't do that. I don't think I can do that. That's incredible. It's a very conflicted feeling of like, good work. How could you do that again? So, but that doesn't happen all the time. You get the opposite feeling as well. But and again, you get that by just jumping in and going for it.
Well, and as someone who's worked on a bunch of movies, I suspect that you would say that the process of making One Path has been similar to what it's like to work on movies. Obviously, you have to defer to someone else's vision, and you have to make something within confines of, a studio. But at the same time, a lot of people might be surprised to hear of the chaotic nature of what it takes to tell a story at all, even on the big screen or a comic book or even like a YouTube video or something. And I think it's interesting to hear that perspective, because sometimes you'll hear teachers at very prestigious schools like Art Center or Cal Arts or wherever, where they charge, $70,000 a year, telling people to just continually study, Andrew Loomis and fundamentals and all that kind of stuff. And, again, to hear that there's another way of doing it might be surprising to some people.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that world, because I did try and get into art school because I thought that was the right way. I went to, tried to apply to an art school, and they New Zealand's most prestigious art school, and they wouldn't have me. And then so I went to another one, but then I found that it just didn't fit me. So I don't know what that world is like, but I think there are different approaches though. So you have to recognize in yourself what you are trying to achieve and what you are like. It's not there is not one size fits all, right? There are some artists that their way of getting the vision inside them is to study the real world and maybe even use models and things like this. And I really respect that and love that. You just had an artist on, and he clearly is using photographic reference, but then painting into that and bringing that bare bones photographic reference into something much more vivid and real and with more depth that only a painter can give. And that is one way of doing it, and that probably requires a lot of study and requires observance to the source material and all those kind of things. There are incredible artists like James Gurney, who did Dinotopia, which is one of the most inspirational books to me. But his approach is to make mock-ups and lighting studies and so on. And who can argue with that? That just absolutely works. It's one of the most brilliant approaches, and the proof is in the pudding. It's absolutely phenomenally beautiful, and you fall into those worlds. But that is fundamentally different than me. I kind of recognize that now at this stage of my life, that I don't do that. I want to look at a blank page and fall into it and make make marks on it until the vision I have in my head comes up there. And you're never quite there. You're never quite there. The vision I had doesn't really come out, but something in the effort comes out that is amazing. And there's something in that process that I really connect to. It's pure exploration. It is a bit more wild and dangerous. I don't know if the drawing's going to come out right. The proportions might be weird. The lighting might be completely abstract in some cases. I'm just trying to reach into my brain somehow and see if I can core something representative, something that has the right feeling and look onto the page. But it's pure exploration. There's no reference. I'm not looking at other source material. That's not to say I'm not studying in advance sometimes. Like if I want to understand how a certain thing looks, then I will learn about it. But in that moment of drawing, I'm just looking at the page. I'm looking at the page the entire time.
Well, and it seems like a big part of the work of being a creative person, and like whether professionally or not, is not the actual studying or the work itself. It's finding, like the work is actually finding whatever workflow that you can get yourself to do, and to be able to look at someone like James Gurney or Morgan Weistling and to be like, I admire the final result and I admire them as artists, but I'm fully prepared not to ever do that, and then still to like be like learn from them and be inspired and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's about recognizing what yourself, understanding yourself, and leaning into your strengths, right? Because you have myriad weaknesses, and those are all true, and you might be very aware of them, but they're irrelevant. You have to just focus on your strengths, right?
Yeah.
Just forget about your weaknesses. They are there. They won't go away necessarily, or they might. Through the process of focusing on your strengths, your weaknesses might go away. I don't know. I'm no psychologist. I don't know the right way to improve yourself, and maybe that's not the way to do it. But if you're going to make something, you really have to focus on the creative, which is a positive force, right? It is a force of summoning something out of nothing, or reconstituting a new thing out of these raw elements.
And so much of it is trusting yourself. And I think that's actually the danger of watching a famous artist paint or draw or make something, is you're watching a magic trick. You're not actually learning how they're doing it. You're just watching 30 to 40 years of experience.
Yeah, totally. That can be very distracting. It can be inspiring as well. But if it's distracting you from doing your own work, that's not helpful. You really got to take that inspiration and run with it in the moment, When you get that feeling that from watching a video of someone else create and it sparks something in you, you almost want to, this won't help your YouTube video, but you want to pause in that moment and go away and actually just make right then.
Well, and I think it's like with all this stuff, it's like balancing between that competence of you as a draftsman, and like you feeling like you're good enough. And then when you do run into a roadblock in terms of something, you run into something you can't draw, which is inevitable, not letting that take you off the path of pursuing whatever you're trying to do creatively. And for me, it's strange because I don't see myself as like the best, drawer in the world, but I do find myself like potentially creating things of value to other people, whether it be in these interviews or little YouTube video shorts that I do, or, YouTube educational things. And people are getting something out of that, And I generally tend to be somebody who focuses on my own flaws. And every time I step outside myself enough to ignore those, that's when I make something on accident that people care about.
Yeah. There's something in that. Yeah. It might just be being that's flow state is about forgetting about yourself almost, and just being in the moment of the work or whatever the thing is. And maybe there's something in that where it's like you suddenly stopped caring about yourself or stopped focusing on about yourself in the same way. And that becomes valuable to others.
Well, and I think even in the context of this interview, like we're trying to create something that will promote your book. Ultimately, that's the truth of this, right? Yeah. But it's like, how do you do that? And it's like we try to.
That's why.
Yeah, right. Is that good?
Like a lot of artists, I think this is actually one of the real conundrums for artists. It's not necessarily how to make the thing. That's hard enough. Making artwork that you love is hard enough. But getting other people to be interested in it selling it is like, that's an art form and a skill set that other people tend to have. It's very rare for artists to have the ability to both create amazing work and to sell it. And I don't have the sell it part in me. I'm like, the artwork is supposed to do the selling. I poured my heart in there, and I don't want to repeat myself. I don't want to go out and be doing a million posts on social media and regurgitating the same content, but from a different angle. That's not the way. I know that's what you're supposed to do, but it's not the way I'm wired. I would want to make one post, and then I go back to doing the work again. I crawl back into my cave, and I go over the cauldron and try and make the magic spell again. And so yeah, actually selling the work, that's so incredibly hard. I hope that by sharing, some things about how it's made, that's inspirational at least. But yeah.
And I think it's like doing the thing in whatever way you can. It's like this worked last time when we did that interview, and it's over, I think it's like 200,000 views now. So people seem to be interested in that, but that was completely accidental, and it's like, the only way to promote it is just like try to be authentic and be yourself, while also trying to package that in a way to where people start to consume it and become interested in it. I think that like the modern day version of podcasts are really interesting, because those seem like little advertisements for whoever the podcast you're listening to seems to be. It's like, whether it be for a comedian or a scientist or like a musician, anybody,
Yeah, I should really be doing more of that stuff. But so I'm very grateful for this. Yeah. It's not something, again, that I naturally think about, and it's the fact that you're an artist who does naturally think about it. That's again a rare combo.
Yeah, but I think there is a trade-off sometimes, because it's like, sometimes I do catch myself prioritizing the way it's packaged and the actual, like, the viewer before myself enjoying the product, and I find that's really common among YouTubers, is that a lot of them get burnt out because they're making art entirely for other people, or they're making art for a YouTube video. It's never about the image. It's about like demonstrating a very specific thing to make sure the thumbnail and title are in line with like how to shade a sphere or how to draw an arm or something.
I think we were just talking before about Joe Rogan, and that's kind of one of his superpowers. You get the sense that he's not obsessed about the thumbnail or obsessed about any of the mechanical things. Not that it's wrong to be obsessed about those things. Like Mr. Beast is obsessed about those things, and it freaking works, and his videos are amazing. But Joe Rogan clearly, at least, doesn't talk about it. Don't get the sense he cares about it. What he cares about is having an actual conversation. And that's all he is doing, is having a conversation. And that's what he's absolutely focused on. Everything else is kind of irrelevant. And I think people absolutely connect with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that authenticity that ultimately shines through and creates something of value and interest, and I think it's like, there's a billion projects that have had $1 billion put behind them that have failed because they weren't authentic, or because they didn't resonate with an audience.
Yeah.
They were made in a boardroom, and there are plenty of YouTubers that, started in their bedrooms and now have become some of the biggest creators on the planet, just because they were able to resonate with their audience on a really fundamental level.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fantastic time to be for that kind of stuff. I love it. I spend more time on YouTube than any other medium.
Yeah, it's great. Well, and I guess one question I have towards that, it's like the general recommendation for being authentic to yourself is to just be yourself. Like, don't consider other people while you're creating the artwork. But one important part of being a person is paying your bills and paying your rent and stuff. And it's like, for like, do you have any advice to anyone that's like struggling to pay their bills while also trying to be an artist?
Man, that's hard. It is hard. So just to tell you my bit of my story, I spent from high school, after high school, I tried to get into art schools. It didn't work. I spent like a few months at one and really didn't connect with it. And after that, I went on the unemployment benefit, and I was on the unemployment benefit, the dole, for 7 years. Like, that's right. That was basically my career at that point. And in fact, I was on there for so long that I started to feel like, well, this is my life. I'm going to be unemployed my entire life. I better figure out, can I live under a bridge? Because that's what's going to happen eventually. And I was very much thinking that way. Then, luckily enough, I was actually fired from the dole. I had an argument with I was painting a mural on the side of a bus actually for a work for the doll thing. I got accused of stealing, so I lost my temper. And anyway, I got kicked off the dole, which means that you go for 6 months without any benefit. And that was incredibly painful, but it was a good thing. It was actually a good thing. And what I did at the time was really incredibly stupid, really, but I'm glad I did it. Just when I had no money coming in and I had no savings because I'm on the unemployment benefit, I was getting like $120 a week, New Zealand. So that's like $60 US to live on every week. At the time, this is like, 20 years ago now. So I had no money coming in, no way of really paying a living. Where I decided, let's move to Wellington. I was in Hamilton at the time. Wellington is New Zealand's capital city and also New Zealand's most expensive city. So I decided to move to the most expensive part of the country, me and my partner, Kate. And luckily that was, and by the way, at the same time, it was like I'd heard that Peter Jackson was going to start making Lord of the Rings. So it was like, well, there's this company down there doing really interesting stuff. So I moved down there, and because I was unemployed, I had to get a job. And so it was the smack in the face that I needed. I wasn't entitled on the dole thinking that I should be getting this benefit. I felt massive guilt from it. I'm just taking taxpayer money. It felt like shit. And so like I said, I was unemployed. By the way, I was a musician as well. I love music, and I played in various metal and punk bands and stuff like that, making my own music. And so I started selling every piece of musical gear I had to make, to try and pay the rent. And eventually I got a job at a video game store, right? Like the equivalent of DB, Electronics Boutique, that kind of thing, but a local New Zealand version. And I'm very grateful for that job, but man, it was demoralizing because, all I wanted to do was be creative and be artistic. And I loved working at that game store, and it taught me a lot. Very grateful for the opportunity, but it was not what I wanted to be doing, And so it was actually quite miserable. It was like almost better being on the dole, because at least being on the dole, for all the guilt that causes, I was at least every day making music, drawing comics, being creative, And so worked at this game store for quite a while, and then eventually the first Lord of the Rings film came out. So but before that, I basically took some of my art to a local publisher who basically made children's books, or educational books more like, so not exactly the pure type of children's books, but books that the government will buy to put in schools and so on. And I made could just about scratch, not a living out of it, but could scratch enough. By the way, I had trained myself to live on no money. I'd living, like I was saying, on 120 New Zealand dollars a week, which is like 60 US bucks a week. And that is really living on fumes. That's basically find a place with as many of your friends as possible, find the cheapest, shittiest place in town and go and live there with all your mates. And that's how you can afford to live. And then don't spend anything on food. But I was eking a life out that way, saved up a little bit of money basically from working in this game store and doing a little bit of this freelance work for illustrative work with these children's books. And I saved up enough money that I thought that's how much money I need to live for, I think it was, I figured out 6 weeks or 12 weeks. I can't remember what it was. It was in that range, only about 12 weeks. I could live that long without having to work. And in that time, I basically sat down and I made my first comic book that got published. Not my first comic book that I ever made, but the first one where I had some friends that were going to publish it, just locally. And it was called Killer Robots Will Save the World. And it was really, didn't have a story. It was just, I wanted to draw giant robots in Wellington, smashing everything to pieces, and draw dinosaurs. It was just like, I wanted to put all the things I love into one book. Didn't need a story. I was kind of inspired by Jeff Darrow's Big Guy and Rustin the Boy Robot and that kind of stuff. So I made a comic book, and I managed to make it in the time frame for the money I had. And that's how I balance things, eking out, doing some work, illustrative work that I'm very grateful for, but that did not inspire me in any way. And working in this game store. And so life is those kind of trade-offs, right? I was trying to save enough money to be able to do that work. And that, by the way, that thing wasn't commercial in the end. It was sold around Wellington. It was really well received. I'm very proud of it, but there was never a path to make much money out of it, and it didn't. But I'm so glad I did it. Then luckily for me, later on, I got a job at Weta Workshop. And from there, it is a similar trade-off. I'm very lucky to have that job. Right? Richard Taylor started something truly incredible that I thought couldn't exist, which is a place for creative people who like drawing weird, imaginative things out of their minds, right? Can have a job, can have a living. And so, but even there, my real heart is in telling my own stories, building my own worlds. And so I'm always trying to find those opportunities, and it's always a balance, right? Of having to work on other people's projects where they're commercially, they pay the rent, and work on the things that absolutely inspire you. And if you're lucky and you keep on applying yourself, maybe the latter can become the thing that fully, keeps you going. But that is hard. I think there's a lot of luck in it. You've just got to apply yourself and hope for the best and do your damnedest and hope that the thing that you truly care about is what the world also cares about. But there's no guarantees of that. There is just the world will do what it does. So with regards to doing other work, you really do have to be practical. At the end of the day, you've got to keep the lights on, And while I was, like I said, I spent a long time on the unemployment benefit. It doesn't feel good to be taking basically from everyone else. I'm much happier working for someone doing artwork for them, or I would rather drive a bulldozer than that now. You want to create value. You want to create something good for other people, something useful for other people. Be constructive. So even when I'm not fully motivated by a creative job, acknowledging that is the luckiest, rarest thing in the universe, I put my absolute all into that, and then try and figure out a way of rationalizing something when I don't quite understand it. How can I achieve the very best for that person? So that, and that's making yourself totally service-minded, and that's absolutely fine. A lot of people prefer that, because being fully creative is incredibly hard. Your brain most people's brains are not firing creativity nonstop of creating new problems to solve, basically. Brain will create a problem. I need to solve it creatively. Most people aren't. They're quite happy for problems to be delivered to them by someone else, and then they help to solve those. And that's very, very fulfilling. So both can work. And of course, it is rarer to have the person that is fully dedicated to bringing their own vision to life. I don't think you should trick yourself that everyone can be in that role, right? Because the world wouldn't work that way anyway. Maybe it will, in the future, once there is a time of abundance and more people can adopt the promise of what something like YouTube or the internet really allows, which is for everyone to be more people to be creative. But I don't think it tends to work that way. It tends to work that that only very few people in the population are dedicated enough to really chase their vision down to as far as it takes to chase it. And most people will happily take comfort or take sustenance in servicing other people's visions or adding to something greater than themselves, which is they're both totally necessary. And so you kind of have to realize that in yourself as well, because being the person making the project, being the film director, the person writing or illustrating a graphic novel, that it's all on you, and it should be, and it's hard. There is a lot of pressure, and so you got to realize, do I want that pressure?
Yeah,
balance that in yourself.
Well, and I have talked to hundreds at this point of people about this idea of how do you justify being creative? Because when you think about it for a second, you should be doing literally anything else, trying to find the cure to cancer or making more money or anything, right? And it's trying to make the environment where you feel safe enough and it's important enough to spend time doing it. Those are the two most important things. You'll never be good enough. You'll never be as skilled as you think you should be. It's all about putting yourself in a mind space where you feel safe and comfortable doing your thing. And when I talked to Richard about this on that episode I did with him, he was telling me about his first job where he was cleaning toilets, and he worked at a grocery store as like a forklift operator or something, and all while trying to be creative on the side. And luckily, he's been able to make this giant thing to where he's able to employ however many people is employed at Weta. But it took that cleaning of toilets to even justify spending time making sculptures and movie props and all that kind of stuff. And going through it,
and still does that,
Yeah.
It's brown or the toilet needs cleaning. Rich is down there talking to himself half the time until someone says, no, maybe your time is best spent somewhere else, and they'll summon him off to go do something important.
But that story of it, that emotion of it, it's not logical, right? It's like almost choosing the illogical decision to go and like follow like an ideal or like a dream of something, And when I look at you, it's like your story wasn't glamorous, It's like arguably embarrassing at certain points, in the same way that I've had embarrassing moments in my career and stuff, and I will have embarrassing moments in the future, And it's like doing these projects, doing anything, making YouTube videos or making your graphic novel. It doesn't, like, the end result isn't the point. The end result is great if it's received well, because that means you get to keep doing it. That's the great part of it. But the thing you're getting out of it is the journey, is the act of making it. And I think that's like, whether it be something that's financially viable or not, that doesn't matter. Like you really shouldn't be thinking about that when you're trying to do any creative endeavor. You're trying to. Sorry, go ahead.
There's a weird tension there. Because you're right. It's the journey, not the destination. But the destination absolutely matters.
Yeah.
Right. And that's very hard, because I will sit there making my graphic novel, and I am focused on making the product, making the thing that conveys my vision as good as I can be. And I'm trying to make it to a time frame so that I can deliver it to people, so that, and so I honor my publisher, and right, everyone gets what they need. I'm working towards the destination, and I'm very fixated on that. And then I have to let go and be just on the journey and revel in that. And then I recognize that I know that when I get to the destination, I will feel really good about it for all of about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? And then I'll be like, okay, we need to go off. We need to go again now. We need to pack our bag and go off on another creative journey. So you need both. It's not like one is important. One is driving you forward towards a destination. And that goal can be huge. It can be make a feature film, make a video game, make a comic book, or it can be just like finish one page, right? Or do one drawing. It can be as grand or as small as you like, but the destination definitely matters, and the journey is what you actually are going to enjoy.
Right.
The journey, well, you're on it. You're hopeful, but it's both. It's hiking. It's exploring. The journey is both enjoyable and painful. How is this working? How can I make this better? I think maybe I don't know if I told you. I think I told you in the last one my analogy of like Evel Knievel. It's like doing a jump. That's what it feels like. Each drawing, I'm doing a jump, and then I'm like, what? This is a stupid idea. You're going to crash into the wall-beam. All right. And then you land. All right. And sometimes you land and the bike's in pieces, but you made it for the other side. And sometimes you land gloriously. And it feels like that every time, even to this day.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't change. And I think it's interesting for me because I'm earlier on in my career than you. I'm just figuring this stuff out, and I'm starting to get more and more successes personally beyond just like doing stuff with other people. And that video that we did, again, it's the best video that I've done ever. It's done better than everything collectively. And in the moment, we weren't thinking about that at all. Like if 200,000 people of it, 2/3 of Wellington in terms of population size has seen this thing that we did together just on some random afternoon. And thinking about it that way, it's like I was happy. I was like, oh, this video is popping off, but like, what's next? Like I need to do another video to even just like consider even doing this again. And we were talking about like, we want to, again, the goal of this is to promote your book, but we were talking about like, how do we want to do that? And logically, the way you do it is you just like focus purely on process. You focus on like things that you as a person realistically don't have any interest in doing, like teaching people how to draw a dinosaur or something, but it's like, that's all, like, even though it's better logically, it's actually not, because it's not true to like who you are and what you'd be choosing to do if you didn't have to do it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting one. yeah, I'm not one to really usually want to show my process. And it's not that I think it should be kept secret. It's probably insecurity, like in that, like I was telling you, in that analogy of jumping through the ravine, mostly what you're feeling is existential terror. Like, am I good enough? Is this, why, this is too hard. This image looks terrible. Like these feelings of insecurity and potential failure. Like, and that's what a drawing feels like to me most of the time. And then every now and then something will crystallize and the clouds will part and you'll be like, there it is. There's the vision. I don't know if this is different for people who take a more a referenced approach, who use, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I don't know. But for me, it's like blank page, and then what comes out of it is there's a moment with when the pencil drawing is coming together, and it's like, oh, good, okay, there's a thing. But then I start the rendering, which is adding color and texture and form, and then it's like chaos. It's like, oh my God, this is the worst image I have ever made. How do you what are you even doing? Like, what, you should go drive the bulldozer. I was doing that, but what? You're an idiot. And so showing that process is like, showing that chaos.
Yeah.
Like, so
standing naked or something.
But also I think it's not just that. And I want to talk about this in a constructive way. So I don't want to be too cynical and too negative, but I feel like the mechanical side of how you do a drawing is not the most interesting thing to me personally. It's not what I choose to engage with, probably because I feel like I find it inspiring. Maybe that's what most people who are watching this will find it inspiring. It makes them want to do something. But I don't really take a lot of learning out of it. I don't take any that's practical side out of it. And so I'm not thinking about those things. Or I've made myself happy. I've reconciled the thought. I'm trying to understand still why I don't feel truly comfortable showing that stuff. I get asked a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes showing drawing is more straightforward because it's so quick, and I tend to draw relatively quick, and the idea of showing a pencil drawing from zero to finished drawing or relatively finished drawing a sketch doesn't feel that odd to me. But something about the whole process of rendering it is it's like psychologically unraveling in some way. It's quite weird.
Well, talking to people that I know that do representational work, and Morgan Weistling, the guy that I interviewed in the previous episode, he is like the most representational that you can get. He photographs people, he hires models. It's like a whole thing. Like he has an insane amount of work that goes into planning before he even starts his painting. And he described the process of him doing his work as like stabbing himself in the chest with a ballpoint pen the whole time, and he's only happy when it's over. But it's like, even if you have the roadmap of something to follow the whole time, it is still suffering. It's still hard. It's like running, or it's like climbing a wall. It's like doing anything hard. You're waiting for it to be done. But there's something inside you that drives you to keep going further. And like, I think this is related to the practical side of stuff in terms of like, how do you choose to be creative when you should be doing something? Like, if you're a student right now working at Costco or a bank or whatever, and you're trying to do this stuff, it feels the same, whether you're working on King Kong or Avatar, or you're selling a painting for $50,000, or you're recording a YouTube video that's going to get 1 million views. It's the same no matter what, And I think it's like the goal, again, I think is way more of like a mindset or like a curiosity in relationship with failure, like that insecurity, the reason that you don't want to share your work, it might be fundamentally insecurity, but that's actually okay, like maybe that's just part of your identity, and that's part of who you are, and that's actually part of the artwork, like I think
I'm back to a point. I don't have a completely formed thought on this, but you're talking about like why to be creative, artistically creative, I guess, and draw, compared to other things, compared to going out and curing cancer, as a ridiculously over-the-top example, and sending rockets to space or something. It is worth comparing your creativity and your desire to be creative to that, right? Because even though I am not focused on what would make it commercial, the artistic choices, the writing choices that would make something commercial, that's not because I'm trying to be selfish. It's because I'm trying to be true. I'm on that quest. I don't know if what I've created is true. I'm on a quest to try and be closer to truth, right? And knowing that I'm probably a million miles away from that, but I'm trying. And what am I trying to do? That's to me, if I can prove to myself that this feels true, that this resonates, it gets me inside, and all these different levels that matter to me, then I think it will give the same feeling to other people, or at least I hope that it will, right? And that is trying to create value. It is no different than going to work on a project that will hopefully make other people's lives better, right?
Yep.
It's capitalism, it's like, I want to give something of value to other people. And I happen to think the way to give something that is of the most value is to be as honest and authentic to what I feel as possible. That's what I think will create the most valuable thing. I might be wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong in principle. I might be wrong in the instance of like what I create, but I know I'm not wrong in principle. I know I'm right. That the best way is to try and find that something that resonates powerfully with you, because then you have the chance that it will resonate powerfully with others. And that's the job of art, right? To touch someone. Hopefully they feel the same things. And that could be frivolous. It could be humor, right? It could be the profound. Humor is profound, by the way, but like it could be frivolous, but it can be beautiful, and it can be deep, and it can be everything in between. And that is just as valuable, or can be just as valuable.
Yeah.
As the curing of the cancer. The curing of the cancer is important, but what do we live for, right? We live for art, and we live for things like art. We live, to go to the stars, to build the rockets. These are all things that are part of the tapestry of what you're trying to do. And so doing art is not, you have to go, ask yourself, is this valuable? And it has to be valuable to you first.
Yeah.
Right? If it is valuable to you and you really feel that, then you have a chance that it will be valuable to others. And that's what you're really therefore trying to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think people tend to like look at how the world might have done them wrong, and that's why they're not successful at the thing that they're trying to do, and especially with art too, because it's like a meritocracy. Like, can you make something that people care about or not, And you, who is somebody who lived on like government programs and have done very blue collar jobs and all that kind of stuff, and started late, you're still able to find a place in the creative process of making. Like, if someone's goal is to make movies, you've done that, and it's not like there was anything special or different about you compared to anyone else. It might have just been like a love and trust in who you are and what you care about more so than anything else.
Yeah, and that's something that's developed over time. I definitely had more cynical and more victim-like mentality when I was younger. Not that I was massively that way, but I had more of those feelings. And that's changed over time. I've definitely become much more confident in myself, and it's not because I think I'm great or something. It's just that I think, you have to believe in yourself. Who else is going to? And then I know that I love doing stuff. I love being alive. I want to create interesting things. I want to create value for people, right?
Yeah.
And therefore I have to trust in myself. That doesn't mean I'm not critical. I'm very critical of a lot of stuff. But I try and rein in the cynicism, because it is a natural tendency as well. I understand it to be cynical, but the cynicism leads you into a sort of a victim mindset, which doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
You want to try and be a hero, not a victim. And even if you are victimized, the world victimizes, right? It happens. But that doesn't mean that's the right posture to fall into.
Yeah, I think it's trying to be unapologetically yourself, Again, for me, it's like I exist in this sphere where I'm like interviewing some of the best artists in the world, at the thing that they're trying to do. And I don't feel like I've really done anything. I haven't created images that I'm really proud of, that I would feel really comfortable sharing with anybody, And it's like, but that doesn't detract from the value that I'm trying to provide, or the, a credibility of what I'm trying to say. And I think it's like, I am always battling against something in myself internally of like, I'm not a good enough artist to start saying stuff to other people, or I haven't done enough with enough, famous people to really justifiably believe in the things that I'm trying to say, And it's like the way to get around that, ironically, is not trying to necessarily get better at the thing. It's to be more comfortable in my own skin, to just continually be myself.
Yeah. And by the way, that just happens with time anyway, right? You become wiser. You can't help it. Wisdom will happen to you one way or the other. You can't help but be insecure or not secure in yourself when you're younger because you just don't know that much, right? And you have to have had experience to be able to sit back and look and go like, oh, well, it worked better when I went this way than when I went this way. Yeah. And when I felt the self-doubt, when I felt, so that just happens over time. Some people are gifted with it early on, or they're lucky, and they get that confidence and surety, and that's wonderful. They either get that through their genes or their upbringing or their culture or whatever. But not everyone does, and so I think that's why optimism, having a mindset that it can get better. Yep. I think optimism doesn't have to be, maybe I'm choosing the wrong words, that it's not that things necessarily will get better. Life is unpredictable, but the hope basically that they can. And that you're not going to be saved. You are the solution to your problems. And it doesn't mean that other people can't help you and that we shouldn't help each other. That's obviously fundamental. But we can't take the sort of the more victim mindset that I'm never good enough, because of course you're not good enough. No, it is. Not a religious person at all. Yeah. But I guess part of Christianity and so on that strikes a chord that is true is that we're all made imperfectly in God's image. And it's not that there necessarily is a God. I don't think that way, but I think that we imagine a perfect state that we could be. Yeah. Right. And it is imaginary. It is something to strive for, but it's something you never get to. Why can't you get to it? Because you can always imagine something even more perfect.
Yeah.
Right? It's so, how could you ever get there? And therefore, why would you think you are God or godlike? You will always be on that quest until the end of your days, and that's good to be reaching up for the light,
Yeah, I get it. I think with all this stuff, it's like there's a version of your comic, one path that you wish it was, probably. Maybe you wish you did it when you were younger, or maybe you wish it was an animated TV show, or maybe you wish it was a giant series of epic movies and stuff. But doing it in the way that you can right now is like, that's the only way you can do it. Like we talked about this, I wish there was a way for us to talk in person because there would be less technical difficulties. There's probably more authentic conversation. We'd be able to go get lunch or something afterwards. So there'd be more of a personal connection. But this is the way that we can do it, given the resources that were allotted, Yeah. And I think, again, whether you're doing something as an employee at Costco or, someone who's worked at Weta for, decades at this point, the truth of it doesn't change, It's like the conversation that we're having doesn't change, even if we're, recording in the nicest, fanciest studio on the planet, or on like a Zeppelin, or even if we're on Mars or something. We're having a very similar conversation about creativity and being honest with yourself. It's just the scale of it might change.
Yeah, if we're in person, we'd pick up on different things.
Yeah, right.
If you farted, I'd smell it. So we're very lucky that you're living in this age where we can do this. Across space like this. Pretty rare.
But yeah, well, and
I think we can do it again in person though. That would be cool.
I'd love to. Yeah. And again, I think that's the goal with this stuff. Is like to just continue to be honest and to, I guess, try your best at this. And I'll give you a quick thought though on unless you had a specific question, but no, go
thought on what when I think about what one path could be. It is a comic book or graphic novel, I guess is the grown-up word. I just call them comic books, but one path is a comic book. It is there. That's my little advanced copy. And it's a book because that's what I'm capable of doing with my own hands on myself. Although there are two other names on there. There's Andy Lanning and Nick Boschia, two of my co-authors, both incredible creatives. And I couldn't have done it without them. It's a book because that's what I chose to do with my own hands. And by the way, previously I was running Weta's Game Studio, and I created a bunch of video games for a company called Magic Leap, with a team of about 50 or 60 people. And that was his own process. And through that process, I had sort of made myself step away creatively. I started the whole thing to be creative, as creative as I could possibly be, to create these video games and this totally paradigm changing mixed reality, a spatial computing device that Magic Leap had created. But I had slowly given away a lot of my creativity, my day-to-day creativity to other people, right? So that they could do their jobs and they could feel empowered. And that's what I was trying to balance, was give them as much autonomy as possible while still trying to achieve the visions. And then I realized actually when that all came to an abrupt end, COVID put an end to that, by the way. All the speculative money disappeared overnight and COVID hit. All the money shrunk back out of the system and went into the things, the necessary things, the safe bets, right? It went away from the speculative things. So Magic Leap was in a lot of trouble at that point. Luckily it continued on, but my part of it was gone. And that made me go back to like, wow, what am I doing? And then I realized, I'm not responsible for all these people now, and it was a real relief. I feel bad about saying that because I love all those people and we were making great things together, and I realized I need to make something myself, right, where it's me making it, and I can make a comic book. That's why I chose to make a comic book. I went from making the most insane technologically advanced video games in the world.
Did that cost millions of dollars to put together?
Yeah, I think one of my games was $40 million, I think was the entire budget all throughout it. Anyway, which is an insane amount of money. But anyway, I lost touch with my creativity during it. And I didn't even realize that. It happened by osmosis. I learned a lot. But then suddenly coming back to comics, it's like, this is me. I can sit here and I can focus on this. And then when I thought about, could this be a video game? Could this be a television series? Could it be a movie? For some reason, so far, my mind has recoiled from all those options. It's like, no, this is a comic book. It's a graphic novel. That is it. Now, maybe one day it could be some of those other things, but to me, I'm sort of I didn't want it to go through any of those filters of what makes those other mediums, because they do go through all the commercial filtering of like, well, you have to have a diverse cast, and whatever Hollywood says is important at the moment, you have to jump through those social constraints. It can't be, could I have the nudity in it? Could I have I could probably have the violence, because Hollywood's always been fine with violence, but could I have the characters be real because they're nude in it, right?
Yeah.
And because that made sense in the world. And I couldn't have that, and there'd be a bunch of concessions, there'd be a million concessions I'd have to make that into a significant project. But I knew if I made it as a comic book with my own hands, everything I want to be in it that I can realize with my own hands can be part of it, and I won't have to make any of those concessions. And that just felt absolutely right. So the idea of it being something grander than a comic book, as if there's anything grander than a comic book. But the idea that it could be, it's like, no, that those will diminish it, not make it better. So I want it to live here as this thing that can be the truest vision, and then I will be happy that I did my best, and that's that thing,
yeah.
right? And then maybe it can have a life after that if it makes sense. Or maybe it won't, but that's not relevant. At the end of the day, it's like I'm going to make the thing as true to itself as it can be.
And it's sort of, I guess I've heard that a bunch, and it's strange to hear a lot of the time. It always surprises me that I hear people, they work in video games and they started out as a concept artist or an illustrator or something, and then over the years they moved up to being an art director for the company that they work for. And, they end up being an art director on a massive game, and they're, have all the status and credibility that comes around that. But their day-to-day is sending emails and managing people. They no longer draw and paint and do all that kind of stuff. And I think I'm kind of seeing that in myself now. It's like, I'm trying to be a YouTuber about drawing and creativity and stuff. And a lot of my day-to-day is editing videos, or doing things that I didn't really get into it for the sake of doing all this stuff. And the higher scale that you're operating at, you do have to make more and more concessions on the way you spend your time. Like you said, Richard will go and clean toilets or throw out trash when it's around, and the person telling him, oh, you should be spending your time differently, they're not saying you should go and be creative. They're saying you should go manage people. You should go and make sure someone is making sure this thing is done in time and stuff. And I think that's one of the concessions about trying to do work at scale that is popular, is that you are inevitably going to have to give up some of it if you want it to be that TV show or video game or whatever else you want it to be,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe. I mean, the bigger the project, the more concessions, into reality in general and to other people, there'll have to be, and you can be absolutely more autocratic about it. And in some circumstances that works or is allowed, luckily that's still allowed in films. You can have the auteur director and it's their way or the highway. And that's cool. But quite often these things are not like that. They are much more managerial and consensus driven and so on. And that produces stuff. I personally don't think it's the best way to make art and make things that feel true. I think it's the best way to produce things that the most people agree with.
Yeah.
That's a different goal than
sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I think it's like, for anyone watching this, people sometimes equate with scale with truth, like because you had the chance to work on.
I think that's something in science as well. And, that people will make arguments even now that there's a consensus around a certain thing. And it's like, well, that's not the way science works. Science doesn't work by consensus.
Yep.
And art doesn't work by consensus either. I mean, it is a good barometer, that if a lot of people seem to agree with the thing. In the world of art, if a lot of people agree with it and paying money for it, they tell you that they feel something about it. And so obviously that's important. In the world of science, it doesn't, that doesn't mean anything. You can still have a Galileo turn up and who's got a non-consensus view. And that will happen forever through science, because science is just explanations, and those can be coming from a perspective that works or a perspective that doesn't quite work. And that can always be improved. But yeah, I think that's a very easy trap to fall into in any creative pursuit. And I say science and engineering and art are all part of the spectrum. They're, and consensus doesn't really produce something interesting to me anyway. Maybe it does to most people.
But you also have to to make the money to keep the lights on, you have to be practical, and at a certain point you might have to seek consensus just to have a shred, have it be 30% truth and 70% consensus, but at least you get to be 30% true.
Yeah. You're always going to be, when you're dealing with people, making something at scale with lots of other people, it has to be consensus. It's part of the formula, right? Otherwise it is dictatorial. Yeah. And then that's not fun for anyone who's working with you if that's going to be the process, unless they take a particular mindset that they are happy being completely servile.
Hey guys, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Greg is one of my favorite people to talk to, and I really do highly recommend checking out his book. It is a labor of love, and it's a sort of passion project that I think everyone aspires to do creatively. And the fact that he's taken the time and the energy to put as much as he has into this book, I think it's something really special that is worth checking out. Please consider, again, checking out the links in the description to Greg's book and also the courses. And thank you so much again, and I hope you have a good one.